now is the banking, and this is the most important function in a great sense, because if your bank is up to date, or your bank transactions have been allocated, your customer accounts will be correct and your supplier accounts will be correct. If it's not, you can't send out customer statements, and that's bad because you can't get paid. This is also the transactions that we will be reviewing on a weekly basis, so we will be reminding you to get this done if you haven't done it. So if you have not watched the video and you have not set up your bank feed yet, that's the first thing that you will do. But after you've set up your bank feed, you can now come and start doing your transaction allocations. So you go to banking, you go to transactions, and you go to banking. It will take you to this screen. Now, we've already set up your bank accounts for you, and you will then, your default bank account should be your main account. If you want us to change your default account, we can also do that. If you have more than one bank account, they will be listed here, and you can select the other bank accounts as well. Okay. In this case, we only have one bank account. So let's start at the top. This little block will tell you whether you have a bank feed that is linked to this specific account. And then it will tell you up to which date it has last been updated, and it will give you the option to refresh now. So if you see that the transactions are, it hasn't been updated recently, you can actually choose refresh now, and then it will log into your bank account and pull in the bank transactions from there. I'm not going to do it because these transactions are fictional, so I don't actually want to pull in the bank feed. So if you want to go and see if it shows you that there was an error, you can actually go to your bank feed status, and it will then tell you what your bank feed status is, if there are any errors and things like that. Right. So what you have here is, this is your bank balance, or in this case, a totally fictional bank balance. I only wish that was my bank balance. And you will see which account you are busy with working with, and how many transactions do you still have that have to be reviewed. Now, reviewed transactions will go to this little section, and all your transactions that you have previously reviewed will be under this tab. Here you can do searches, and you can go and look for specific transactions. You can search on any one of the fields that you can see here below. You can choose a date range, and you can also make changes to the transactions if the period is not locked. When our period's locked to specific times, whenever a VAT period is done, we usually lock that VAT period unless there's a very exceptional circumstance, and usually that's only for a short period of time, and then we lock the VAT period. And then any transactions that happen before that VAT period's end will not be editable anymore. And if you want to make changes to those specific transactions, you have to do journals or put through other types of transactions to make the changes. If you get that, let us know, then we will help you to get that sorted out. The other instance where we lock the books are at the year end. So after we've checked the year end, we've made sure that all the transactions have been processed for the year end, we will actually lock the books up to the end of that year, and you won't be able to make any changes. Apart from that, if the transaction does not show a little lock here, you can change the transaction. Please do not, under any circumstances, add or delete transactions on your bank. If there's transactions that have been duplicated, let us know. We will sort it out. If you want to add transactions, the only reason why you would want to do that is if there's a transaction missing. Rather send us the bank statement that we do it. Otherwise, we have to go and fix whatever went wrong. And because we do this kind of thing on a daily basis, it's much easier for us than for you to do it. Right. So now we come to these transactions. that I've pulled in from the bank, or more or less in this case, you'll see that it will pull in the transaction on the specific date that appears on the bank statement. The payee is a field that you will use if there is no bank feed that's pulling in. So usually you can ignore this. It's actually unnecessary amount of work that you have to do. These little blocks are for our use. So if there's a little option to change, we would have a for office use only or for Rockfooters use only. So we use these little blocks to indicate that we've checked this line and that this line is correct and that this one can be reviewed, and then it moves across to your review transactions. So please do not tick this blocks and choose the option to review it. Here you will have the description as it appears on the bank statement, and we're going to basically use that to figure out where to go to with the different ones. I'm going to, first thing, you will see that you probably at this stage only can see 8 lines here. I find that very, very frustrating and a waste of time to try to work with 8 lines at a time. So what you can do is, if you want to change that, you can click here on these little gears and you can change the number of rows. You will see that it will activate that, and there you can show number of rows to show in line grids and in transaction grids. I choose 25 for mine because that's a quantity that really works well for me. Right. Okay, let me just go back then to my banking. Right through Sage Accounting, you can use your back buttons to go back to a previous screen like I've done now, which is quite useful. Right. So now I've got this screen and I want to see what is going on here, and I can't really see, so I'm going to make my column a little bit wider. Right. So this is ClickUp. This is the project management software that I use, and this is an expense. So I'm going to choose an account for this, and for this I'm going to use subscriptions. Oh, but I don't have a subscriptions account. So then I'm going to add a new account and say subscriptions and licenses. And that's an expense. You will basically see that you've got your whole list of things. If you're not sure, you can always just put it in, set it up and leave that open. Send me a note and then we will let you know what kind of account it is. If you are unsure and you are scared of doing this, let us know and we will set up the account for you. Then you just save it. Right. So then you'll see it automatically goes to subscriptions and licenses. The reference is already pulled or allocated when the bank fee is pulled in. You do not need to overwrite it. It's over unnecessary work. You do not need to change this description unless the description is absolutely nonsensical and it says something like a case where you want to use that is where you did an ATM withdrawal to pay wages. Then you will change the description to wages or the specific person that you paid or so on, because that will actually help you to know more about that transaction. But if you have enough information here to know what it was, no need to change it. Right. If there was VAT on the purchase, you will choose the appropriate VAT type, and you won't see the amount that allocates to VAT, but if the VAT type is set up here, it will do the allocation of the VAT to the specific account. Right. Now, this column, reconciled, will usually be ticked. You do not need to work with this at all because we do the reconciliation of the bank statements on a monthly basis when we do the month end. Other functions that are available here on this side is if you use this little drop-down arrow, you can actually add notes and comments and things. Here there's even user-defined fields that you can use. I've never actually seen this used, but sometimes there's a story about a specific transaction that you want to make a note of, that you can always remember, okay, this was the story and this is why we did it like we did it, or we did the allocation the way we did it, or there's something that's weird or wonderful about the transaction. So as I say, I think it's the coolest function, and I've never ever used it, but I still think it's a cool function. You can then show more or show less by toggling that specific thing. I'm going to come back to these little bullet points because you're going to use that quite often. We also have the option to split the transaction. So what you will do is, if this specific transaction actually have to be allocated to more than one expense account, you will click on the split button, and we will say, let's say 100 Rand of this needs to go to subscriptions and licenses, and then the next line item you can leave the description, and the rest goes to, let's say for argument's sake, printing and stationery. You will see if you click on a field, you can just start typing the description or the account name, and it will automatically pull it up. Or you can actually use your drop-down button to go and search for the account. We can also use different VAT types for the different lines, and then you'll see that there's 30 Rand that we haven't allocated yet, and that 30 Rand I'm now going to allocate, and the remainder is 0. So we have allocated everything on the this specific thing to different lines. And now you will see it changes here to split. So you will know that this specific expense has been split to more than one account. Okay. You can actually attach a document here. So if you want to, and you can actually scan your invoices or documentation that is associated with a specific line item and attach to the specific line. I find this quite labor intensive though. So what I would recommend is that you use this for situations where you actually want to have access to the invoice afterwards. Now, a specific example of where this can happen is where you buy a computer and you have a warranty on that computer. There you will scan the invoice and attach it to the specific item. You can use that for insurance purposes. We can use it for the asset register, and you can use that should you have a warranty claim. So that's an instance where the labor involved is actually offset by the benefits of the situation. Right. This allocation button is applicable only when there's a customer or a supplier transaction, and I will show you that just now. And we've already spoken about the plus and minus buttons that you are not going to use. Right. So this is now what we've done with the allocation of this line. I'm going to now show you different examples of different types of transactions to just give you a better idea of how we allocate different transactions. So I'm just going to save my changes just to make sure that I don't lose anything. This is probably the most important thing for you to learn, how to do this easily and properly, because this is going to determine the quality of your books. But we review all your transactions on a weekly basis. So if we see that you're struggling with something, we will let you know, and we will help you and train you and educate you as many times as is needed that you can do this. The good thing is anybody who's capable of running a business is capable of doing this. Right. Tribeca Standard. What did I do there? I saw a client there, and that goes to the entertainment account. Important, entertainment is exempt from VAT, so you cannot claim VAT on entertainment. Right. Now, here's something that's really important. Here's one of the places that we're going to use the mapping rules. So this little bullet is the option to create a rule. So first we enter the line the way that we always want it to be allocated, and we click on the mapping rule. in the top line, we're going to choose the part of this description that is always going to be the same. Now, obviously, the date can always change, and the card that I use to pay at Tribeca is going to change. And even maybe the standard, I suppose there's something else other than a standard, if there's a standard. So I'm just going to use Tribeca because that's the part that I know is always going to be the same. You can use a payee there. I've never actually used that, but you can do that if you want to. If you want the description on the books to be different from the description on the bank statement, you can enter the description that you want on the books here. Usually I just leave it open, and then it will use the exact description that appears on the bank statement, and that helps me to know that, okay, this is what happened. So I just save there. And every time that Tribeca appears on my bank feed, it will automatically allocate that transaction in exactly the same way that this one has been done. I have chosen a variety of transactions to allocate that you can see the different ones. So what we have here is we have Astronautical is one of my customers. So what you will see is what happens here is we're going to choose customer. And here you're going to have a drop down, or you can just start typing in the customer's name, as if I can type, Astronautical. There is never a VAT on a customer payment or a supplier payment because the VAT is taken or on the invoices when it's entered. Okay, now the one thing that we have with a customer payment or with a supplier payment is that we have allocations. This is the one that I said I'm going to show to you. So you will see that where that one is grayed out, you can actually see that that option is available, and we're going to click on the allocate function. Now it will show me all the invoices that are unpaid for this specific client. Now you'll see that we received 150 Rand, and that it is not actually the exact amount that is outstanding on any one of these invoices, but I happen to know, because I'm the owner of the business, I happen to know that this actually belongs to this specific invoice. Why doesn't it want to choose that option? Amount received, 150 Rand. Okay, there it goes. And if there's a discount that I want to put through, I can put it through here. And there you will see that you can put different, let's say it was a huge amount of maybe 3 invoices combined. You can split it between the different invoices. You can use different amounts exactly the way that the person who paid the amount wanted it to be split. Then you just say save. Right. Next one, Postnet Wood Deal. I did some printing there. So that's an expense, and that goes to printing and stationery. There is VAT on that, so it's standard rate. And I always, when I go to Postnet Wood Deal, it will always be printing and stationery, unless it's courier. But even though it might use a mapping rule to allocate an expense to a specific account, you can always override it. So I'm going to set up a mapping rule to say that if I see Postnet, it must go to Postnet. Now, just one thing that's important here, if you do this selection, you press delete or anything, it will actually kick you out of the screen. Why does that? I have no idea, but the only way to work with the screen is to click somewhere and use your backspace or your delete buttons. So it's one of those Sage accounting quirks. I think it's because it's probably a browser application. I have no idea whether that's the real reason, but that's the only thing that I've been able to figure out through the years. Again, I reduce this portion to the amount, the part of the description that I know that will always repeat itself. And when it says Postnet, it will allocate it here, whether it's Postnet Video or Postnet Menlyn or Postnet whatever, it will always allocate it to this specific allocation. Service fees, and that's my bank charges. Bank charges always have VAT on it. The only thing on your bank that will not have VAT on it is your interest. Paid or received, no VAT. Again, we're going to set up a mapping rule for that. That description will always repeat exactly like that. And yeah, so and value added services is also bank charges. I'm going to work quite quickly here because you have a fair idea. I just want to show you the different types of transactions that repeat a lot. It takes time to set up the mapping rules on your first batch of bank statements, but it saves you so much time in the future. Okay, so we're going to just save to make sure that everything stays as it is. Okay, so you will be able to see everything that has not been allocated yet. Now, here's another thing that I want to show you. This is a transfer that I've done from one account to another account on my online banking profile. Now, you only have that many accounts on your online banking profile, and you want those transactions to allocate in a specific way. So one of the ways to get this done, and I think probably the only one to make it pick up on a mapping rule, is to use nicknames for your different accounts. So this is my business account, this is Raakvatters, and LMB is my personal account. My business credit card is BCC, my personal credit card is CC. So I've got little nicknames for all of my accounts. So then I can basically say, whenever Raakvatters paid anything to my personal account, that should go to my loan account. Okay, as you can see, we have not set up a loan account on this specific set of books. So loan account, and this is Bugs Bunny's loan account. Bugs Bunny, and that is equity. This we will set up for you when we do your Sage accounting setup, and you can save that. Right. So loan account Bugs Bunny, there's no VAT on a transaction that goes to a loan account. It doesn't matter whether that vendor is VAT registered or not VAT registered. There can never be VAT on a transaction that goes to the loan account. Right. The mapping rule, when we say that when it sees this description, it will always go to my loan account. And you will see now later on how useful that is, because every time I do a transfer from Raakvatters to LMB, it goes to the loan account. Right. Astronautical, did we set up we didn't set up a mapping rule here. So what you will do is when you set your customers, whenever it says astronautical, you actually want it to allocate to that directly to that specific customer. So you will use your mapping rule. There you can see the real customer who made that. So you will say astronautical, and you will say it must save that. And there you will see that the moment it sees astronautical, it will allocate it to that account. But the one thing that has not been done yet, you'll see that that allocation little icon has been highlighted because we've done the allocation. So if you see a customer transaction and there's no, that function has not been highlighted, you know that we have not done the allocation yet. So let's do the allocation. It's that specific invoice, and we just tick it, and it's been allocated, and we save. Here we've got a payment from Netcash, or to Netcash. That was for my Sage subscription, and that's an expense. It also goes to subscriptions and licenses. I actually have quite a few subscriptions and licenses transactions. Most people in computer and technical kind of professions have a lot of subscriptions and licenses. Other businesses do not have that so often. Again, I'm going to set up a mapping rule, and I'm going to choose the portion that's going to repeat. So you'll see I've chosen a variety of transactions to show you. Some of them is life insurance. The only time when life insurance can be deducted from income tax and becomes a business expense is if it's key man insurance. So in this case, let's pretend that it is actually key man insurance, which is not. But I do not have an expense account for that, and I will actually say assurance and then say key man. That we know that this is actually specifically tax deductible. Otherwise, I've got to allocate that to a non-tax deductible expense. Again, it's a transaction that's going to repeat, so I want to set it up as a mapping rule. I'm going to remove that and save. Right. I've paid some wages to my son to do some work for me, and that goes to salaries and wages. And every time that he is getting paid through the business, that will be salaries and wages. Again, so you'll see I actually used a send money function to get the money to him, but I changed the description to wages Simon, because send money doesn't mean anything to me when I see that on my ledger. So in this case, I'm not going to set up a mapping rule, because what the mapping rule will see is a send money transaction. So I'm not going to set up a mapping rule for this. Money that I paid to CIPC, let's put that towards subscriptions and licenses. In my normal books, I don't actually use that. Oh yes, there's no VAT on life insurance ever. No VAT on wages or salaries, and no VAT on CIPC fees. That is something that I actually use quite often in my business. I don't know about Bugs Bunny Incorporated, but yeah. Right. Credit card fuel purchases. The reason why I show you this is because there's a specific VAT way for fuel. Even though you might see VAT on the slip for your fuel, you cannot ever claim VAT on fuel. So it's actually no VAT. Again, you're going to set up a mapping rule, because from Sasol, you're always going to buy fuel, unless it's coffee that you bought, but you will see on the amount it will be much smaller. You're going to again isolate the portion that is going to repeat at all times. So Sasol is the part that's going to repeat. Right. I'm not sure why this mapping rule did not pick up here. Let's just see. Oh, I didn't delete the first portion. Okay, so you see the difference there between when I leave the first portion, and then there's just a small little change on the next one. It doesn't pick up. So I want to isolate literally the portion that I'm certain that's always going to repeat. Right. Elmer Fudd Rifles, one of my suppliers, and a supplier works similarly to a customer. So you're going to choose the supplier that you're working with. There's no VAT on the supplier payment. We're going to, oh yes, these I created, Elmer Fudd. I created these. I didn't actually import them. That's why it's not picking up a bank transaction. And then I'm going to do an allocation similarly to the customer allocation. There's the 6,000 Rand invoice. I don't know why it's not allowing me to tick there, but in any case, I can do it manually and then just say save. Okay. Africanos is also one of my customers. Again, allocating it, setting up the mapping rule. Africanos, and I'm going to allocate it. Don't know why. And save. Okay, so I'm going to do some of these allocations while I'm paused, and then I'm going to leave you the ones that I haven't shown you yet. Right, I've done the bulk of the allocations. Here are a few that I've left just to give you an idea. Cartridge Hyper will always be printing and stationery. There's VAT on it. I will usually set up a mapping rule. I'm not going to take the time now. MQN, I do my telecommunications through them. That goes to telephone and internet. There's VAT on it. Again, I would normally do a mapping rule and just leave MQN there. Goofy and Mickey and Minnie are my subcontractors. Not really, but for the case of this. So I want to then allocate that to subcontractors. There's no account for that. I will just then add an account and say subcontractors, contractors. And that's an expense account, and I'm going to save that. And so that's R1,000, and Mickey is also a subcontractor. Again, I would set up mapping rules normally for this. Just to save time, I'm not going to do that. And then I go to the next page. Let's say Minnie is not a subcontractor, but she is an employee. You will see that your salaries and your wages, except your casual wages, that will go directly into your expense account for salaries and wages. But if you pay salaries and you have a payroll, the amounts that are on the payroll goes to the salaries and wages control account, which you will see is not normally set up. So again, we will have to set up that account. Let me do that quickly. Salary control account. That is let me see current liabilities. Right. Cool. Any accounts that you need set up, if you're not sure, let us know. We will sort it out. We do this on a daily basis. Insurance, a very important thing to remember about insurance, there's VAT on insurance. A lot of people don't know that and they don't claim it. So that's, a VAT claim that you will lose if you don't actually use that. Again, I will set up a mapping rule. I'm not sure whether I've got it repeating later on. Right. Then Vodacom is, again, telephone and internet. And that will also usually be a repeating one that we will set up a mapping rule. That one is telephone and internet. Just save, and I think I'm nearly done. Let us see what we've got here. Okay, we've got an ATM withdrawal. Okay, here's something that there's a function on Sage Accounting that's very cute, and it messes up books completely if it's used incorrectly. So listen carefully. If you have a bank account that is set up for bank feeds, and you have a transfer from bank account A to bank account B, and both accounts are set up for bank feeds, do not use the transfer function. What we will do is we will set up a transfer control account for you, and you will allocate the transfer from the one account to the transfer account, control account, and from the other account you will also allocate it to the transfer control account. Because what the transfer function does, and you will see it here, is this transaction will actually be duplicated or entered on the account that we're going to choose now. So ATM withdrawal actually goes to my cash on hand account, and I will choose my bank account here, and there's no bank feed for cash on hand, so I can safely use the transfer function to take the money for the ATM withdrawal to put it in the cash on hand account. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to show you now what happened is, here's the transaction, cash on hand on the 18th of the 6th with that description. If you go to the cash on hand account here, you will see that transaction has been entered here. Now imagine if there was a bank feed here and that transaction already pulled in, and you use the transfer account or function, then it actually duplicates that transaction. So it creates just a mess. Right, let's go back to Scrooge Incorporated. Last transaction that I want to show you is a payment to SARS. Now, SARS can be a payment for payroll taxes, in which case it will go to an account, which is the payroll taxes control account, or it can be an income tax payment, in which case it will go to your income tax payable account. But in this specific case, this was a VAT payment, and there's the only time that you will ever use this little function for VAT is when you have a VAT payment, or you get a refund from SARS for VAT. And that is the only time that you will ever use this. I do not recommend a mapping rule for this, as it's better to actually do this manually. And this is basically the ins and outs of bank feeds. If you have transactions that need to be imported, we will do that for you. You can export your transactions if you want to. It will actually create a CSV file for you. If you have duplicates, you can actually tick here transactions, and you will see that these options at the top become available. So you're never going to use the markers reviewed, because that's the ones that are earmarked for us. You're not going to delete transactions. If there's transactions to be deleted, we will do that. But you can say keep duplicates if you want to keep all those transactions. And that is basically the ins and outs of your banking screen. Enjoy.